As of July 4th, it became official. The Big Beautiful Bill became the Big Beautiful Act. But the question on your mind is probably, how's it going to affect your retirement? Stay tuned to this week's episode of the Retirement Income Source, where it's all about the income. Welcome to the Retirement Income Source, where it's all about the income. I'm David Scranton, here with my good friend and co-host, Sarah Samuels.
Dave, it's great to be here with you and, of course, with all of our listeners. And, you know, it's been a few weeks since I've seen you. How was Connecticut?
Oh, it was nice. It was nice having 4th of July up there. A little bit more temperate than it is down here in Florida. How about you?
Oh, yes. It was very nice having 4th of July, but it was sweltering hot, unfortunately, down here in South Florida. We had a lot of that humidity that we get, but it sounds like it was beautiful.
Just coming in, flying in, myself as a pilot, of course, we had thunderstorms on the left, thunderstorms on the right. It was just this narrow swath coming in the runway that was not getting hit by lightning, so I felt pretty grateful. But good to see you.
Oh, well, that's really good that you managed to avoid all the lightning and thunders you were coming in. That could be really dangerous. But it's good to see you, and it's good to get together and talk about this Big Beautiful Bill Act, because I think our listeners have a lot of questions. I know a lot of people are worried about how it could impact them.
Yeah, and it's so controversial because people are worried, even though it passed by a narrow margin. And the concerns, I think, on both sides of the aisle are, did it really address the deficit issues, or did it make them worse? And of course, if you listen to Elon Musk, he'll be the first one to say it was the most irresponsible thing ever because it made the deficit issues worse. And there is truth to that. That is a legitimate concern. Of course, the counter argument is that, if taxes stay low or go even lower, well, then is more money for reinvestment, more money to stimulate the economy, and the debt doesn't matter as much if you're growing the economy. But, in order to determine which camp is right, Sarah, we need to have a crystal ball, right? And last time I checked, neither you nor I have that crystal ball. So let's focus today on what our listeners can do to protect themselves if they're in or near retirement.
Yep. Well, I think it's extremely important for all of our listeners to understand, especially those people that are worried about taxes. Maybe they're worried about some of the estate planning benefits and even Social Security benefits and what that's going to look like now. It's something else, Dave, that we are introducing on today's show is we're going to be having a live Ask Dave hotline. So before we were asking our listeners to call and leave a voicemail and that our team would get back to you, but now we actually have a crew standing by ready to take your calls. So if you have any questions for the show, if you would like to submit your Ask Dave question to the show, we'd love to hear from you. That new phone number now is 855-930-6293. Again, that brand new live Ask Dave phone number is 855-930-6293. And now, Dave, let's get into our Ask Dave question.
So in other words, what you're saying is that they don't just leave their questions on a recording. They actually get to talk to someone.
They actually get to talk to someone.
Love it.
Yeah, we have someone standing by to help.
Perfect.
Absolutely. So let's get into our Ask Dave question from Ben in Connecticut. He says, my wife and I are making more than $100,000 now, but we're still working. We estimate we'll need about $100,000 in income when we eventually retire. So how will this new law affect us?
All right. Well, Ben, a great question. And I guess it depends upon whether or not you are going to be getting just $100,000 in retirement or getting more than that. Because the interesting thing is a lot of this law is really an extension of the tax cuts that were done in the first Trump administration that were set to expire. And now these tax cuts are made permanent. But what that says is that you, as a couple, you said we, so I assume you're married, as a couple filing jointly, you can make a little bit over $100,000 and only be in the top bracket of 12%, which means that your overall taxes are less than that. So at $100,000, your overall taxes might be $9,000 or $10,000. So the good news, Benjamin, is that that's a really low rate. If you think about a lot of foreign countries, they've got tax rates that are significantly higher. A lot of foreign countries have tax rates 50%, 60, 70%. If you can pay 12% or less, that's good news. So you're not going to have to pay a lot, which is good, but you also have to be careful because if you, for example, if you've saved extra and you've got extra money sitting in 401ks and IRAs, remember when you turn age 73, you're going to have to start taking forced distributions. So you may say, okay, my income early in retirement will be $100,000, but it's going to be more later on. So you have to watch out for those required minimum distributions. And Benjamin, I hope you're listening. We're going to talk more about that on the show today. But also Social Security. If you're retiring and not taking Social Security right away, remember Social Security, when that kicks in, that's going to push up that thing called a provisional income, which we're also going to discuss in more detail, which means now that may bring your taxable income up over that threshold. So you're now out of the 12% bracket. You're in a higher bracket. So again, I hope you're listening. Hope you can stay tuned, because a lot of good things that'll help answer your question in more detail. But the good news overall is that the marginal tax bracket is still very, very low for incomes of couples retired right around $100,000 or less. So great news for you, Benjamin.
Benjamin, thank you so much for calling into our Ask Dave hotline. And we do have a live number. We have people standing by ready to take your calls. That new phone number is 855-930-6293. And you can tell them your Ask Dave question for the show. You're listening to the Retirement Income Source, where it's all about the income. I'm Sarah Samuels here with David Scranton, and today we're talking about what the One Big Beautiful Bill Act really means for your retirement. And so far, Dave, we talked a little bit about the concerns that it will create a deficit and that could impact the economy. But you mentioned when you were answering Ben's question earlier that it was really an extension of the tax cuts that I think were passed into law back in 2017 during the first Trump administration.
Right. They took the temporary cuts and made them permanent. I guess back then they didn't have enough support, the Republicans, to make it permanent. So they made it temporary and they got it through. But now with the extra support they have in this administration, it's able to be made permanent. And there's another thing, too, that I forgot to tell Benjamin that I think is important for everyone listening here to understand, is that there's also a higher standard deduction that's going to be available for those that are over age 65, which means, again, that's more money at a zero bracket before that 12% bracket kicks in. So that's a big, big plus. The real question marks, Sarah, are around Medicare. Yeah. And truthfully, I haven't studied that in great detail yet. The actual act is pretty lengthy. It's hundreds of pages. But that's the question as to what will it do with certain Medicare benefits. But as looking at it from a cursory standpoint, it doesn't look like it's really going to affect it that badly. Yeah. So that's good.
The Social Security, the senior deduction, they're calling it, for people 65 or over, is one of the things that I think a lot of our listeners would be very interested in, because that could be a big benefit. But again, you need to worry about the income part of it in retirement, what you owe taxes on, and if you get pushed up into a higher category. Yeah,
I believe it's at $75,000 for singles. They start to phase out that extra standard deduction. At $150,000 for married couples filing jointly, they start to phase out that higher standard deduction. So it's not for everyone. And frankly, that's a way that they were able to appease, the Republicans were able to appease the Democrats by saying, okay, we will give this at certain income levels, but if the income levels get too high, we're taking this benefit away. So if you get into really high income levels, there's really no benefit. In fact, at really high income levels, people could be paying just a little bit more in tax. Yep. So that's good. Good news is most of our listeners can actually benefit from that. And then, I know a lot of you have saved a lot of money also, and you want that money to go to your heirs, your loved ones, when you're gone. And now you might have $1 million, $2 million, or you might have more. But there's good news on the forefront for those of you who really want to pass your legacy on to your loved ones. All that and more coming up. I'm David Scranton, here with Sarah Samuels, and you're listening to the Retirement Income Source, where it's all about the income.
Thank you for spending some time here with us today on the Retirement Income Source, where it's all about the income. I'm Sarah Samuels here with David Scranton, and we are talking about how the One Big Beautiful Bill Act that was passed into law on July 4th, how that will affect your retirement, especially for those that are already retired and are looking into retirement. So we've talked a little bit about how it'll affect taxation, especially when it comes to RMDs, when it comes to some people are worried about the deficits. They're worried that it might create create economic woes in the future. But there are a lot of good things. The Social Security standard deduction is one of them. So if you're looking for a comprehensive list of all of the different ways that this bill might affect your retirement, I encourage you to check out our website, incomeradio.com, where you can download that free white paper that we have exclusively for all of our listeners so they can get caught up on this.
Yeah, and let's talk about estate planning for just a moment. It doesn't. These benefits won't affect a lot of people, or a lot of people won't be excited, I don't think, jumping up and down. But if you have accumulated a really good sum, and when really good sum, I mean 8 figures or so, the estate tax thresholds, the thresholds at which you could pass estate tax-free money, federally estate tax-free money, to your loved ones, have now gone up to $15 million if you're single, and $30 million if you're married.
Which is pretty nice if you have $15 million ready to gift or for a legacy for your heirs. It used to be around $13 million, right?
It was lower, but it was scheduled to sunset back down to a lower number, which it didn't do. So, for example, if you own a business, you may feel like, gosh, I don't feel like a millionaire or a multimillionaire, but the value of your company might be worth more. And remember, before, you only got that $15 million threshold, and that was it. That if you passed it to your spouse, well, then, your spouse had only, if you passed it all to your spouse only had a $15 million threshold. Now, if everything goes to your spouse when you're gone, there's still a $30 million threshold that's preserved for your heirs, tax-free money. Now, check the state in which you live, because that's federal estate tax laws. Some states have mirrored those thresholds, and some states have decided to keep the thresholds lower. But on the federal level, that's certainly good news for those with higher net worths.
Absolutely. Well, if you have questions, if you are wondering how this bill will affect your retirement, I'm going to encourage you to call into our live Ask Dave hotline. We have people standing by waiting to take your calls and help answer your questions, especially if you have a question that you would like to ask the show. That brand new phone number is 855-930-6293. Again, that's 855-930-6293. Let's go to our question from Jill in Connecticut. And she says, has the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, has it changed taxation on Social Security?
All right. Well, great question. And the answer is no. It really hasn't changed anything with that. So what are the thresholds? Well, remember, there is this thing called modified adjusted gross income that's in the tax law. Now, I know you're used to gross income and then adjusted gross income and taxable income. Well, the MAGI, the modified adjusted gross income, is designed primarily for determining taxation of Social Security benefits. And what that is that's basically your income from all sources, including tax-free municipal bond interest. So yes, tax-free municipal bond interest is tax-free, but it gets lumped into this equation to determine this modified adjusted gross income. So it's income from all sources plus your tax-free municipal bond income plus half of your Social Security. And if you're single and that number is over $25,000, then part of your Social Security is taxed. If you're married and that number is over $32,000, then part of your Social Security is taxed. Now, when you get to $44,000 of income, up to 85% of that Social Security benefit can be taxable. Now, that doesn't mean the tax equals 85% of the benefit. It means that 85% of the Social Security benefits might have to be claimed on your tax return as taxable income. So you can see for most taxpayers, there really isn't a lot of ways to get around taxation on Social Security, especially if you've done a really nice job saving and investing in 401ks and IRAs throughout your retirement. So again, the rules haven't changed, but it's worthy of restating those rules, because I find that for a lot of folks, they're a little bit confusing. So anyways, I hope that helps.
Thank you, Jill, for calling into our Ask Dave hotline. And if you're listening to the show and you're wondering if you could get a checklist or some way to see exactly how this bill will affect your retirement, well, we have a white paper for you. You could check it out and download it by going to our website. That's incomeradio.com. So you can understand better how the One Big Beautiful Bill Act could impact your retirement. Thank you for listening to Retirement Income Source, where it's all about the income. I'm Sarah Samuels here with David Scranton, and we've been talking about about how this new law signed into law on July 4th, how it will affect retirees and pre-retirees. So, Dave, we've talked a little bit about the concerns regarding the bill and how it could cause a deficit, how there could be lower revenue in the future. There could be economic concerns, but there are some good things about the bill, especially standard deductions for people age 65 or older. But overall, do you think there are any concerns about the Social Security Trust Fund running out of money even faster? You know, I know that comes up every once in a while, but if we have less revenue in the federal government, is that a concern?
That's a great question. I've heard that recently, written in articles. But remember, there's a separate tax that really hasn't changed that funds the Social Security Trust Fund, and that is the FICA tax, right? So if you're working right now, you look at your pay stub, which these days there is no physical pay stub, right? It's all electronic. You look at your pay stub.
Look at your bank app now, right?
That's right. You see, federal taxes withheld, state taxes withheld in many states, and then you also see FICA. And most of that FICA, some of the FICA tax is to fund Medicare, but most of it is to fund Social Security. If you're self-employed, well, then you're paying twice the FICA tax. You're paying, your portion plus the employer's portion. So those taxes have not changed, which is why, the Social Security Trust Fund is still slated to be underfunded in the next 5 to 10 years. It was before, it is now. So yes, it's an issue, but the issue hasn't changed or gotten any worse with the One Big Beautiful Bill Act.
Yeah, it's still there. Now, what about required minimum distributions, Dave? Those went up to 73 recently. Now, if you're 73 years old, you have to pay taxes on those previously tax-free investments. So how does that work? How is that going to be affected?
Required minimum distributions are the same. But if you're concerned that this is going to cause a bigger deficit and cause higher tax rates in the future, then you might want to utilize some good tax planning strategies to reduce those RMDs. It's great that you can retire in your 60s and not have to take those required minimum distributions until you're age 73 and going up to 75 over the next few years. That's all great, but what you do is you compound the problem, especially if your money's growing rapidly in your IRAs and 401ks. So it depends upon your belief. Again, nothing has changed with that, except that if you believe that the economy is going to be able to outgrow the deficit because maybe the 100% depreciation came back. So if you own a business or a company, you can now write off first year 100% of any business assets put into place. You can buy a big piece of machinery or equipment, write it all off. That's great. So that'll hopefully entice companies to do more of that to stimulate the economy. If you think that's going to really make up for the extension of the tax break, then great, you don't have to worry about it. But if you think that it's going to cause higher tax brackets in the future, then let's focus on some tax planning strategies coming up in the next segment.
Ultimately, if you prepare, if you're ready and you focus on the stage of life you're in, your needs, your goals, what you want out of retirement, those are the things that really should matter and what you should be paying attention to. We talk about that on the show often, how there's different people come into power, different laws come into place, and some of them really do affect everyday life, but other things you can hedge against really by having the right plan in place. And coming up, we're going to talk a little bit more about these tax effective strategies that you can use right now if you're planning to retire, if you're already retired, just so you don't get hit with a tax time bomb. And again, if you're looking for a resource, if you're looking for a way to understand how this bill may affect your retirement, I encourage you to check out our white paper, which you can download for free as an exclusive listener by visiting incomeradio.com. I'm Sarah Samuels here with David Scranton, and you're listening to the Retirement Income Source, where it's all about the income. Welcome back to the Retirement Income Source, where it's all about the income. I'm Sarah Samuels here with David Scranton, and we've been talking about what the One Big Beautiful Bill Act means for your retirement and for those that are planning on retiring. So there's been worries about the bill potentially causing deficits in the budget, causing issues in the economy. There's also concerns about the way it affects Medicare and Medicaid, but there are some good things about the bill, especially for folks that are in retirement age 65 or older when it comes to Social Security and the standard deduction. deduction. And Dave, we were just talking about the required minimum distributions, that part really hasn't changed. It was always, you age up 73, you had to take your RMDs, and then slowly aging up to 75 over the next few years. So that's remained the same. Yes,
it's remained the same. No changes there. And it starts at just about 4% of your total balance. So to use a round number, if someone is age 73 and has $1 million in 401ks and IRAs and the like, then their required minimum distribution, their required minimum taxable withdrawal would be $40,000 a year.
What's the most important thing that our listeners really need to understand about RMDs?
Well, beside the fact that they're about 4% a year and you have to take them, as we mentioned, the most important thing is really not a tax item, Sarah, and we talk about this a lot on the show. It's having our listeners choose to take those RMDs from interest and dividends and not letting the government force you to take it out of principal. What do I mean? Well, remember, total return has two components. It first is income, the interest and dividends that get paid out to you potentially or get reinvested into the funds. And the second one is growth or capital appreciation. And early on in your life, you don't care whether you get your return from interest and dividends or from growth. You just want to get return on your money. But when you hit age 73, you want to make sure that that you're getting at least 4% from interest and dividends. Why? Because that's like a rental income that gets paid out to you. And if you could satisfy your required minimum distributions through a 4% interest payment or a dividend payment, now you don't have to sell any shares. You don't have to sell any principal to take those forced distributions. If you don't change your strategy, though, and you stay with more of a growth-oriented strategy that a lot of folks have earlier in life, then you're going to be forced to sell shares and take those RMDs out of principal. And the sad part, Sarah, is with people living longer and longer, it means you can deplete a good part of your IRA or 401k by the time you get to a ripe old age.
That's one of the things that we want to help our listeners avoid. And if you're looking for a checklist or if you're wanting to understand how you could better prepare for retirement and how you can, if you're potentially impacted with any of these changes that are happening with this bill and how you can make sure that you're getting your income the right way, I encourage you to download our checklist. Again, that paper is available to you at incomeradio.com, absolutely for free, exclusively to listeners of the Retirement Income Source radio show, because it can be confusing, Dave. I think a lot of people worry, especially when you are in retirement and if you haven't converted to the income method, then you could be in trouble.
Right.
Now let's get into our Ask Dave segment with our question from Edward in Connecticut. He says, how do I know if a Roth conversion is right for me?
All right, Edward. Well, Roth conversions, that is a complicated question you asked. I'll do my best to give you kind of the framework of it. There are several factors. One is, do you think tax brackets are going to go up later on in retirement versus where you are early in retirement or where you are now if you're still working? So that's part of it. And so that's brackets in general. But the other part of it is what's going to happen to your income. So let's say you retire in your early 60s and you're living off savings or maybe severance, and you have Social Security that you want to delay to age 70. That's going to kick in, and much of that is going to be taxed, as we've mentioned earlier. Oh, and then a few years later, you're taking required minimum distributions, and a lot of that's going to be taxed, and it pushes you into a higher bracket. Then you very well might want to consider some Roth conversions, right? So it's number one, what your personal view is of brackets in the future, and number two, what you think your taxable income is going to do as given these two complexities. Now, the problem is you can't try this at home, right? Some people do a conversion. They want to kind of do it all at once, like rip the Band-Aid off. That's usually not the right plan. Usually a good income specialist has tax software where they can sit down and they can look at your brackets now, what your brackets are likely to be later when these various sources of income kick in, and create a plan where you can maybe do Roth conversions for a certain amount of money every year for the next 5 years or 7 years or 10 years, right? So most of the time we talk about Roth conversions, we don't talk about a conversion, we talk about a conversion plan. But again, a good income specialist can take your particular numbers, plug them in software, and could answer the question specifically for you. Hopefully, though, the general framework that I've given you helps at least a little bit. Thank you, Edward.
Edward, thank you so much for submitting your Ask Dave question. If you have a question for the show, all you have to do is call us now at our live Ask Dave hotline. We have people standing by ready to take your call. That phone number is 855-930-6293. You're listening to The Retirement Income Source, where it's all about the income. I'm Sarah Samuels here with David Scranton, and we've been talking about what the One Big Beautiful Bill Act means for those that are in retirement and for pre-retirees. And Dave, I think you made a good point before you answered Edward's question, where it was really you have to just make sure your strategy is in line, and then you're going to be taken care of. If you're satisfying your RMDs, your other requirements, everything through interest and dividends, as opposed to having to sell down your principal, that's when you're going to be okay in retirement.
That's right. And in Edward's case, it depends. If he wants to convert to a Roth IRA because there's monies, from which he doesn't need the income, then with that Roth IRA, he can still be total return based, regardless of whether that return's coming from the interest and dividends or from the growth or capital appreciation. It really doesn't matter. But if he plans to take income from that Roth IRA, then the best strategy is to be able to generate that income only from interest and dividends, from that renewable resource versus, taking principal and selling shares. Because when you sell shares, you cross your fingers and toes and hope that it grows back, right? And it may or it may not. But when you're taking the renewable resource of income, well, then there's going to be more next year and the year after. And that's why that's such a better strategy. But in Edward's case, for the money that stays in a traditional IRA from which he's going to be taking required minimum distributions, well, now that money absolutely needs to have at least a 4% interest or dividend yield as he gets close to age 73.
Yep. And I think that's why a lot of people, they're just hoping that their strategy works, the growth strategy works. But when you're focused on income, when you have a strategy in place that generates it the right way, then you don't have to worry so much. And I think it really sets people free in retirement. I hope it sets them free because they don't have to stress as much when different laws are passed. There's a lot of media hype. There's a lot of sensation surrounding it. But ultimately, if you have made the right strategy, or if you need to plan with someone to make the right strategy, now is a good time. But if you have the right strategy in place, you don't have to worry so much.
That's right. People think, oh, what if we hit a bear market? What if we hit a recession or a depression? And they worry about all these external things when really all those external things become a problem only if you're selling shares in retirement. But if you're not, if you're living off the interest and dividends, then it becomes a non-issue. And I'm not surprised if this is a new concept that you hadn't heard of until you started listening to our show. I'm not really surprised because, the reality is a lot of advisors just aren't trained to think that way. I hear every day, Sarah, we have people in here that come talk to us about possibly joining our group. And I'll say something like, what was the current yield on your portfolio last year? Now, you may not know what current yield is, but in advisor world, that means income. That means interest and dividends, not growth or capital appreciation. So the advisors I speak with should know what current yield is. And inevitably, they'll say something like, well, we made 12% for our clients last year. And I'll say, no, I'm not talking about total return. I'm talking about just the income. And they go, oh, okay. And these are seasoned advisors, 30, 40 years of experience. So it's no surprise that maybe you haven't heard of this unless you're a regular listener, because again, most advisors just aren't trained to even think that way. They're trained to use the same old tired strategies that they recommended when you're 20s and 30s and 40s to continue those strategies in the 50s and 60s. And that just doesn't make sense, Sarah.
Absolutely. And that's why we have different resources available, especially for our radio listeners, and concerning this new big, beautiful bill, what it really means for your retirement, a quick recap and breakdown of it so you can understand how it may or may not actually affect you. And if you're looking for that resource, you can download it for free, again, only for our Retirement Income Source listeners by visiting incomeradio.com.
And most important, we hope that you're here with us, same time, same station next week. I'm David Scranton here with Sarah Samuels, and you've been listening to the Retirement Income Source, where it's all about the income.